morning and welcome to our webinar this morning on the New South Wales COVID assistance packages. Well, who would have thought we would be back here again almost a year after we left COVID and stimulus packages behind? Remember the days of JobKeeper and Cash Boost? We thought they were long gone. Little did we know. The information that I'm presenting to you today has only very recently been released, and we're waiting on clarification on a number of points. So what I will share with you today is as much as we know. There are plenty of questions floating around. I'll answer those as best as I can, and we will do a follow-up webinar next week as more information comes to light. So today we're going to be having a look at the New South Wales COVID assistance packages. What's available for you as a business owner, as an employer, as an employee, a landlord, a tenant, or even a COVID patient. There's nothing extensive or complicated about these new measures at all. There's over 12 different grants available, and we very quickly got our head around them, that's for sure. I've got some frequently asked questions to share with you, some scenarios, and plenty of time for your questions to answer as well. My name is Jenny Wilcock, and I'm a Director of Sullivan Dewing, Chartered Accountants and Business Builders based in Caringbah in Sydney. We've again had a huge response to our webinar this morning, and know that this information is really important to you. Information that you need to keep your business going through this lockdown period. And our government, particularly our New South Wales government, wants to keep your business going and wants you to keep employing your employees. I'll share our presentation with you in a second, and as we go through, please post your questions in the chat box at the bottom. Let's go. I'll answer your questions at the end. Okay, just bringing that up for you now. Hopefully everyone can see that clearly on your screen. So, New South Wales COVID assistance, what's available for you and your business? Our presentation slides have been emailed to you this morning, so hopefully you've got those with you as well as seeing them on screen. Don't forget your questions in the chat panel at the bottom of your screen. So there's a number of grants available. The ones that we'll be looking at today, we will be focusing on the business support grant, the micro business grant, the new JobSaver, which is the business support payment. We'll have a look at the COVID-19 disaster payment. There's the pandemic leave disaster payment. We'll have a look at what the ATO is doing to support our businesses during this time. There's some payroll tax relief, landlord support, and have a look at what is available for residential tenants as well. So a whole sweep of packages. And what is interesting for us accountants at this time is that every single client has a different set of circumstances, and it's almost like a lucky dip. Somebody can get access to grants 1, 2 and 3, others 2, 3, 6 and 7. So all of these will apply to all of you in a different way. Okay, now I've been hot on the communication trail with our New South Wales State Treasurer, Dom Perrottet, and also his media advisor, Guy Podmore, who've been very helpful in answering some of my questions directly. Now, I was speaking with them both late last night, and they shared with me a couple of very good infographics that they have put together. This is the first one, and I won't spend a lot of time on it, but it gives you a very good snapshot of some of the non-business packages that are out there as well, ones that I won't go through directly today. If you do want any help with any of those, just contact me directly. But a nice little summary there for you, thanks to our New South Wales State Treasurer. Okay, this is a further infograph I received from them very late last night, and this is a really good summary of the grants and the support that's available from the New South Wales Government at the minute. If only I'd have had this 3 or 4 days ago, where I spent 6 or 7 hours creating this summary myself. But I've shared with you their summary. This page is a snapshot for the individuals, and I'll go through this in more detail for you, but the individuals essentially are eligible for the disaster payment, support with tenancy, and there's a couple of other smaller things that they're eligible for that I'll share with you specifically. Okay, so then we have the micro businesses, which include sole traders and small not-for-profits. Now, these are the category of people that have a turnover between $30,000 and $75,000. And there's basically what's called a micro grant available to them. Now, this is a weekly payment, and this applies where revenue has decreased by 30% or more. Sorry, it's a fortnightly payment, not a weekly payment. So a fortnightly tax-free payment of $1,500. And this applies back to the start of the lockdown. Now, we can't even apply for this one yet. Applications don't open until the 26th of July. I'll go through this a little bit in more detail. Something very, very important to note, and that's what is highlighted blue here. If you're a sole trader, you're not eligible for both the micro grant and the disaster payment. So if you're a sole trader, you don't get that COVID disaster individual payment that's referred to on this page here. So the disaster payment is for employees, and the micro grant and also the other business grants and the Job Saver are for businesses. As a small business, there's some support with tenancies there. We'll go through that a little bit more in detail. Okay, so then we come to the small and medium businesses, again including sole traders, not-for-profits, and this is where our turnover is greater than $75,000 and where we have a decline of greater than 30% in our business turnover. Now, the key point that's not yet been released by New South Wales Government is how we will test this turnover. We would believe that it would exclude things like JobKeeper, it would exclude things like Cash Boost, and exclude other non-business revenue. We would presume it would just be business revenue, excluding GST as well. So the grants available for the small to medium businesses are the COVID-19 Business Grant, and this is what covers you essentially for the first 3 weeks of lockdown. And I'll go through the finer details of that shortly for you. We have the Job Saver. So this is called the Business Support Payment. It's had a number of names already. Let's just call it the Job Saver. So this is a Job Saver, and this is our ongoing payment. We'll have a look at the specific criteria for that very shortly. There's some payroll tax support and some tenancy support there as well. There's also support announced for the creative arts sector and the accommodation providers. Those ones I won't go through in detail today, but certainly some information for you there. Okay, so let's think about our specifics. So we have got the COVID-19 Business Support Grant. Now, this is a one-off payment, and businesses, sole traders and not-for-profits who turn over greater than $75,000. So these are businesses that are registered for GST, turning over greater than $75,000 and have total Australian wages less than $10 million as at the 1st of July 2020. Not 2021, but 2020. So a lot of the testing on these grants seems to go back quite a way in time. So wages less than $10 million as at July 20. You need to have your ABN registered in New South Wales. And if it's not, then you need to be able to demonstrate that the business is located or operating in New South Wales. And there's another criteria here as well, which might rule some people out. You need to have been trading for greater than 12 months. Now, when we did all the JobKeeper testing, there was some alternate rules. And I would suggest that the New South Wales Government will also release some alternate rules, because we will have some businesses that might have changed business structure, or there could be many scenarios that don't fit their initial broad rules. And hopefully those alternate rules will help a lot more people receive this government support. Okay, what do you get? So if you can pass the eligibility test, then if you've had a 70% decline in turnover, you can get a maximum of $15,000. If you've had a 50% decline in turnover, you get $10,500. If you've had a 30% decline in turnover, you get $7,500. This is a one-off payment, and very, very importantly, this is a tax-free payment. So if you'll remember, when we had Cash Boost, that was a tax-free payment. When we had JobKeeper, that was a taxable payment. So there's a whole raft of these support measures which are tax-free. Some of them, though, are still taxable. So this grant, important to note, is a tax-free payment. How do we get it? When do we get it? So again, this is different to our last Cash Boost and Job Seeker, that your accountant that we were able to apply for and continue to lodge those monthly declarations for you last time. Now the application is through Service New South Wales, and this is an application that you need to do yourself. So from the 19th of July, the application's open. That's this Monday. But already you are able to jump onto Service New South Wales and register your notice. To register your notice. Now, we emailed out the links yesterday for that registration. So if you don't have that email, just drop us a line and we'll get that out to you. What we're unsure of yet is the test period. What we suspect is that we'll be testing a 2-week period from now, a current 2-week period compared to a 2-week period from 2019. Don't hold me to that one yet because those details aren't as yet released. You'll need a letter from Sullivan Dewing or your accountant to support your claim. So where you need to get your accountant involved is they need to do this testing for you to see that your revenue has dropped, and they also need to provide you with a letter that supports your claim for you to submit to Service New South Wales. Okay, so moving on to the micro business grant. Now, the business grant we know is a one-off payment. The micro business grant is ongoing for the period of the lockdown, provided again by Service New South Wales. So who's eligible for this grant? We have got businesses and sole traders that are eligible, and they have to have a turnover of more than $30,000 but less than $75,000. So the smaller businesses, of course. So what they get $1,500 per fortnight so long as they can demonstrate a greater than 30% decline in turnover. This is backdated to week 1 of the lockdown, and it is an ongoing payment to them. And again, importantly, this is a tax-free payment. Very, very handy, that tax-free status. How do we get it? Applications through Service New South Wales. Now, different to the business grant, which actually opens on Monday, the micro business grant doesn't open until the 26th of July. You can register now to be notified when the grant is open. Again, we're as yet unsure of the test period. We suspect it's going to be the same 2 weeks from 2019. And again, you will need a letter from Sullivan Dewing or your accountant to support your claim once that testing has been done. So then we come to the JobSaver. We've had many job-related titles for support payments. This one is called the JobSaver or the Business Support Payment. Now, this is a payment that will continue for the period of the lockdown. It's not just the one-off payment. So a little bit similar to the JobKeeper, but again quite different. So eligibility for our JobSaver is businesses, sole traders and not-for-profits. It's eligible, you are eligible actually both as an employer and a non-employer. So you could have a business that doesn't have any employees. For instance, if you run a business through a trust, it could be a partnership that doesn't have any employees. Both of those structures are eligible for this JobSaver. You do, though, need to have turnover between $75,000 and less than $50 million. You need to have your ABN registered in New South Wales, or you need to demonstrate that your business is located or operating in New South Wales. Now, another very, very important criteria at the bottom of the screen here, you must maintain your staff or your team headcount. So you need to maintain your numbers of full-time, part-time and long-term casuals as at the 13th of July. So if you had 25 people on your books, other than short-term casuals, so if you had 25 people on your books that were full-time, part-time or long-term casuals, as at the 13th of July, you need to maintain that head count to be eligible for this JobSaver payment. Okay, so what do you get? When your turnover is 30% lower than the equivalent 2-week period, let's presume back to 2019, what you will get is 40% of your New South Wales payroll amount. So it's a different calculation every week. This is a weekly payment, and I would presume that the payroll amount would include gross wages, possibly allowances. I would suggest it would not include super, that it would just be based on the payroll that you pay each week. Now, the minimum payment that the business gets is $1,500 a week. That's one payment to the business. That's not per employee. One payment to the business, a minimum of $1,500 per week and a maximum of $10,000 per week. So remember, what you get is 40% of your payroll amount. Now, if 40% of your payroll amount is less than $1,500, then you get that $1,500. For businesses without employees and for sole traders, you get $1,000 per week. So businesses with employees get between $1,500 and $10,000 a week. Businesses without employees or sole traders get $1,000 per week. Now, this is an ongoing payment, but it starts from week 4 of the lockdown. So what the New South Wales state government has put in place is they have put in place the business grants to cover the first 3 weeks. And this ongoing payment starts from week 4 of the lockdown. Now, we believe that this payment will be tax-free. Again, this is a really important point because last time JobKeeper was taxable to the business. This is expected to be a tax-free payment to the business. I'm happy to see some questions rolling in as well, guys. So just post those as we go and I'll get to those at the end of the presentation for you. How and when can we get access to our Job Saver? So we apply again through Service New South Wales. The test period, we're still waiting on that finite information. Now this one, the applications don't open officially until the 26th of July. So you can again register now to be notified when the grant is open, and you do that through the Service New South Wales website. Just remember, we sent out an email yesterday with links for you to apply or register for all of these different grants. You will need a letter from Sullivan Dewing to support your claim. So again, what Sullivan Dewing has to do is we have to conduct that testing for you, and then we have to write a letter supporting that you are registered for, supporting your business turnover levels and that you have met the decline in turnover test. So what you can do now, very important action to be taken now, is you do that initial registration through Service New South Wales to be notified. And you also need to make sure that your business has a My Service New South Wales account and also a business profile. So that Service New South Wales website is going to be very busy because we're going to have everybody logging on and making sure those business profiles are up to date and making sure that you have an account first up. So something for you to get onto before the applications open for this Job Saver. Okay, next we come to the disaster payment. Now, this is a payment that goes on for the lockdown period, and this is a payment for individuals who are employees. So this is not for sole traders, this is not for businesses, this is individuals who are employees. Okay, so who's eligible for this? We have got individuals who have lost greater than 8 hours or a full day's work a week. Now, this one is not applicable for the first 7 days of lockdown, and depending, if we have a look at the table over on the right, depending on the area of Sydney that you live in will depend on when you were eligible. So if you live in this first group of local areas, you are eligible basically from the 1st of July, and those applications are already open. If you lived in Greater Sydney, including Blue Mountains, Central Coast and Wollongong, you are eligible from the 4th of July. And then from the 18th of July, which is coming up very soon, all of New South Wales is eligible. So this is any employee that has lost greater than 8 hours or a full day's work in the week prior. A few more criteria. To get this disaster payment, you have to be 17 years. So a question I had recently was my 16-year-old daughter has lost her casual job. Can she apply for the disaster payment? And unfortunately, because she's 16 and not 17, she can't. But certainly any 17-year-olds that have lost their casual work can actually apply for this disaster payment. So you have to have been unable to attend work and lost income after day 8 of the lockdown, and you mustn't have any paid leave through your employer. Now this one's a bit tricky. So what they're classifying as paid leave, we need a few more details on this, but for the minute what they're saying that you should not have any carers leave or sick leave that you can take from your employer. And if you do, then you're not eligible for this disaster payment. Now, we're still seeking clarification on annual leave. If you have an annual leave entitlement, it's not quite clear at the minute whether or not you are eligible for this disaster payment. So stay tuned on that one. Now, there was a liquid assets test. If you had more than $10,000 in liquid assets before the 8th of July, so that was the first couple of weeks, you are not eligible for the payment, but they scrapped that test from the 8th of July. So the $10,000 liquid asset test no longer applies. Now, what they are including in the liquid asset test, we believe, is cash, cash-related items, any money that you might have sitting in home loan offset accounts. They talk about liquid assets, which may well include shares, but they're not clear on that. So if you've got any questions on that for your specific circumstances, just come directly to me. Now, importantly as well, you can't get the disaster payment if you're getting any other government or pandemic support payment. So if you're on paid parental leave, if you're a dad on paid leave, or any other government support payment, you're not eligible for this disaster payment. Okay, here's a nice table for you of the different weeks and when you can apply. So essentially these are week 1, 2, 3 just running down. So that's for you to keep handy, and also when the claims close for those payments. Okay, so what do you get? For weeks 2 and 3, the payments were lower. They were $325 and $500. They are now $375 and $600, depending on the number of hours that you have actually lost. So there's a little quirk as well. So if for weeks 2 and 3, you had lost 8 to 20 hours worth of work, then you can apply and get now $375 from week 4. If you had lost greater than 20 hours work, you can apply and receive the $600 again from week 4. But there's a little quirk in the details that they've provided. So what they're suggesting from week 4, if you have lost either 8 hours or a full day of your usual hours, then you are eligible. So if you are somebody that only works 5 hours a week, then that's not greater than the 8 hours. But if that is your full usual hours, then from week 4, you are able to claim the disaster payment. Now, that would put you in this category up here, so you'd be looking at the $375 a week, but certainly something to think about. Don't just think that because you don't work 8 hours a week that you're not eligible for anything at all. So have a little bit of a look at that for yourself. This one's an ongoing payment. And what is very important is that this one is a taxable payment to you, just like when you received JobKeeper or JobSeeker. These are taxable payments. So how do you apply? Now this one's different. This one's Services Australia, not Services New South Wales. You'll need a MyGov account and you'll also need a Centrelink account. So you'll need to go and get those set up and linked across to each other if you don't have them. So again, note, the disaster payment for individuals, you apply through Services Australia, not Services New South Wales. Okay, moving on, this is our pandemic leave disaster payment. So this one applies, this is also a federal government payment rather than a state government payment. And this one applies for each 14 days that you have been requested to quarantine or to isolate. So let's have a look at some of the detail here. So if New South Wales Health has told you to self-isolate or quarantine for 14 days, if you have COVID-19, if you are a close contact of someone with COVID-19, if you're caring for someone with COVID-19, if you are over 17 years of age, you have no sick, personal or carers leave entitlements, and you're not getting any other Centrelink support, so there's a lot of criteria for this eligibility. If you can jump through all of those hoops, then you are able to get a payment for each 14 days of isolation that you go through. It's a one-off payment. Both members of a couple can get it if they can both satisfy that criteria. So just another one to have up your sleeve to know about if you do need to quarantine. So this one also is through Services Australia. This is a taxable payment as well. So both of these individual payments are taxable payments, but the business payments on the whole are tax-free. Apply through Services Australia. You again need the MyGov account and the Centrelink account to get this payment. Okay, well, we have to say thank you to the ATO who have come along and provided some support for businesses, particularly a little bit of support for individuals to help us through this pandemic. Okay, so this is what they say. First up, let's have a look at the writing in red. This does not apply to existing payment arrangements and ATO debts. So if you still have money owing to the ATO, possibly as a hang-up of the last lockdown that we incurred about a year ago, if you've been struggling ever since, then those payment arrangements stand as they are. Any existing ATO debts stand as they are. So what they are doing is any business that is now eligible for the New South Wales COVID grants and who can't, struggling to pay their taxes. We know that we've got the June BAS due for payment by the 25th of August. And we also know that you've got quarterly pay-as-you-go instalments due by the 28th of July. So certainly some upcoming tax payments. If you are struggling with these, this is what the ATO is allowing. So if you can, well, first up, they've allowed the tax exemption on the business grants, which is fantastic, absolutely fantastic. You can apply to have a payment plan, a reduced payment plan for the debts that you can't currently pay. And they are not charging any interest on late payment for now, which is great. If you are an individual taxpayer and you have a tax instalment, you can vary that instalment with no penalty. And we did an email out to a number of my clients yesterday that has some very large June instalments, deciding whether or not they will be paid or whether they will be varied down at the minute due to the current lockdown position. So just remember as well, the ATO has said if you had prior debts and prior arrangements, they're not being quite so generous with those people. It really is anybody that is having some troubles with their cash flow and their tax payments as a result of this current pandemic. If you need help with the ATO, that's where you need to talk to us. So happy to hear, happy to help anybody that needs help in this area. Okay, payroll tax. So payroll tax, we know in New South Wales applies to New South Wales payroll of greater than $1.2 million. So if you are paying payroll tax in New South Wales and you have got a greater than 30% fall in revenue, then, or if you have received a payment under the business support grant, which is the one-off payment, or the business support payment, which is the job saver. So if you've received, if you can fall into any of these categories, then you will be eligible for this payroll tax relief. And what the relief is it says that you will receive a 25% discount on your annual payroll tax liability, and they have also allowed deferral of the payments until the 7th of October this year. If you can't make the payment by the 7th of October, they will give you a 12-month interest-free payment plan. Not too bad. So what do they want you to do? They want you to prepare and lodge your June 21 annual payroll tax rec. They want you to prepare and lodge your July and August monthly payroll tax calculations. And then they want you to not pay them until the 7th of October 2021. Okay, so we have to prepare and lodge, but then we get the extension to pay. If we can't pay, we get an interest-free payment plan. Now this one, The payroll tax support is through Revenue New South Wales. So we now have 3 different government organisations, well actually 4. So currently these grants spread across Services Australia, Services New South Wales, Revenue New South Wales and the ATO. So you have to know where to go to get these different concessions. Like I said, nothing complicated about this round of grants at all. Okay, landlord support. So if you are a landlord, and landlord support as well will be provided through New South Wales Revenue. So payroll tax and land tax governed by Revenue New South Wales rather than Services New South Wales. Okay, if you're a landlord and your tenant has come to you and said, we have a greater than 30% reduction in our revenue, we would like some relief from our rent, please. So what the landlord gets, if they have granted this relief to their financially distressed tenants, so the 2 tests there, greater than 30% revenue reduction for commercial tenants and greater than 25% reduction in household income for residential tenants. So the landlord gets land tax relief equal to the value of the rent reductions to a maximum of their 2021 land tax liability. Now, to be clear, your 2021 land tax liability is assessed based on land that you hold as at 31 December 2020. So it's the liability notice that you received earlier this calendar year. So for land held as at December 20, that is your 2021 land tax liability. It is not your land tax liability for December 21. It goes back to December 20. So you can, if you reduce the rent up to that amount, that is what you will get either refunded to you if you've already paid, or rebated against any amount that you owe to Revenue New South Wales. So this applies to commercial, residential and retail landlords. Now, if you don't pay land tax, but you have reduced the rent for your tenants, then you'll get a one-off payment of $1,500. So some support there for our landlords, which is fantastic to see. Not a lot of detail on this one as yet. And again, we need to stay tuned from Revenue New South Wales for this information. Okay, residential tenants, there's a little bit of support there for these people as well. So if our residential tenants have lost greater than 25% of their household income, then they are able to, basically there's a moratorium on their eviction for 60 days until the 11th of September. So no residential tenant can be evicted until after the 11th of September. The landlords are unable to recover security bonds, and they are also unable to enforce lockouts or evictions during this 60-day period. So this support is for our residential tenants. Okay, a lot more detail that we're waiting on for that one as well, and I would imagine that would be through Revenue New South Wales also. All right, we are up to questions. So what I'm going to do now is take down this presentation, and then I will jump right on into the questions that we have. Okay, thank you for posting. There are many, many questions. We have a lot of people on this webinar today. Thank you guys for supporting us, and I really hope this information so far has been helpful to you. Okay, let's start these questions, and let's see what we say. Okay, first question from Ben. Thank you, Ben. If someone resigns with this, will this affect the eligibility of JobSaver? So, think about JobSaver. JobSaver applies, is calculated as 40% of your wages, of your gross wages. So if you have somebody that resigns and they're no longer on your payroll, then yes, it's absolutely going to impact what you get. Now, what's interesting actually, if you have a termination payment to them and that forms part of your gross payroll, then you may actually get a larger amount of the JobSaver because you receive 40% of that gross payroll. Good question. Okay, Pauline. What does maintain headcount mean? Does it mean you have to pay staff wages? I don't actually believe it does. So you can maintain the people, your team members' employment if for instance they've been stood down but they still have active employment with you, then those individuals can go and apply for the disaster payment, but you have maintained their headcount. Now, don't forget, if you've stood them down and you're not paying them wages, that is going to affect the 40% of the gross wages that you can apply for the JobSaver. So maintaining headcount means that their employment is not severed, even though they might be working less hours for your business. Thanks, Pauline. All right, let's go over to Tash. Can you apply for the disaster payment as an individual employee, but you are an employee of your own business? And this is, I would give this one the tick for the most commonly asked question in the last few days. So well done, Tash. Okay, so there's some thought around this. So what we know is businesses will receive a minimum of $1,500 a week under the JobSaver. So if or 40% of their payroll, whichever is the higher, up to $10,000. So let's say you run a business and you are the sole employee of that business, or you've only got one or two employees. So if you have reduced everybody's hours, because you're an employee of that business, then you are eligible to apply for that disaster recovery payment as an individual, again through Services Australia. So you go and apply because you've reduced your hours by, let's say, 20 hours a week. So you're eligible then for that $600 payment. Now, what you know though is that if you've reduced your hours through your business, then you have to also have reduced your salary. So if your salary has been reduced, then again, we get 40% of our payroll. So our salary is now reduced, but we do get the minimum of the $1,500. So you need to basically run some numbers, or run some numbers with us on how you can get the most benefit out of this system. But if you have reduced hours and you're getting the $600 a week disaster payment, your business can still get the $1,500 a week JobSaver payment as the minimum for that business. So something to think about. Let's try and use these grants to the best of our, to create the best circumstance for our business. That's why the grants are there. We know that we all pay a lot of taxes. Important for us to use these grants to help our businesses through this time. Okay, thank you, Tash. Okay, another question here. What if I work 2 or more jobs but lost hours in one only? Can I still apply? That is a really good question. And you know what? I posed that question actually last night to our State Treasurer. And this was the scenario that I posed to him. So this scenario is based on a business in the travel industry. So in the travel industry, we know that they've been very heavily hit, and this business is eligible for the full $15,000 one-off grant, tax-free, which is brilliant. So we'll absolutely apply for the $15,000 grant. Now, this business as well has a very small number of employees, so they will be eligible, I would suggest, for the $1,500 a week JobSaver payment. Now, because this business owner has had no or very little revenue through their business, being a travel business, they went and got a part-time job. Now, that part-time job, because they are a short-term casual, they've now lost their hours and they don't have that income coming through. So I would believe that that person is also eligible for the disaster payment from the federal government, and that's what I posed to our State Treasurer last night. And his answer was a little bit vague, but seemed to say that he believed that in those circumstances they would be eligible for all 3 payments: the $15,000 grant, the $1,500 a week JobSaver, and also the disaster recovery payment. Now, looking at your specific question, which says, what if I work 2 or more jobs but lost hours in one only, can I still apply? So because I would suggest that you can, because you just need to, it doesn't say which job you have to lose hours in. If you have lost greater, certainly in the first 2 weeks, certainly in week 2 and 3, if you have lost more than 8 hours and less than 20, you're eligible for that lower payment. And we know from week 4, you don't need to meet basically that 8-hour minimum if your usual work hours in that job was less than 8 hours a week. So you know what? I would go ahead and apply, and let's see if you can get it through. Yeah, really good questions. Okay, let me jump on to, we've got a whole heap of other questions. Let me jump onto these as well. Just bear with me while I read them out to you. Okay, question from Donna. Thank you, Donna. With the sales for the 2-week period, will it be based off the method used for the BAS? So if you use cash, will the sales be based on cash received rather than accruals? So again, that's a really good question, and this is the detail that we don't have as yet. So I would suggest, I would suggest that these would need to be based on our sales that run through our P&L. Now, most businesses, other than very small sole traders, have to run their businesses on, have to report to the ATO through their P&L on an accruals basis rather than a cash basis. So for BAS, we have the two methods. We have cash and we have accruals. But for P&L and tax reporting, it's mostly accruals other than very small sole traders. So when we have to do the comparative, we need to compare, obviously, apples with apples. And actually thinking about that, whether you run a P&L on a cash basis for those 2-week periods compared to the time before, or whether you run on an accruals basis, I would suggest, so long as you're comparing apples with apples, and so long as you can support that you've got that 30% decrease, that you would be okay to satisfy that test. Now, don't hold me to that yet. This is the one detail that we are waiting on. So at the minute, I'm just speculating, but they could go anyway. They could go based on your BAS method. They could go based on your P&L method. So let's just sit tight and wait for the actual information on that one to be released by Service New South Wales. I can imagine they'll release all these details over the weekend, and we'll be on the back foot again from Monday trying to absorb them all. So bear with us while we try and get this across this as quickly as we can for you. Question from Ian, long-term casual definition. I would suggest, Ian, that you need to go to Fair Work for that long-term casual definition. I'm sure they will have definitions there, or you need to go to your HR provider. Sue, question from Sue. Do you have to be in Sydney and directly impacted by the lockdowns, or just anywhere in New South Wales? And does the reduction in turnover need to be related to COVID, or does it just need to show a reduction? Okay, so a couple of questions in one there. So let me answer the second part of the question first. Does the reduction in turnover need to be related to COVID? No, it doesn't. It just needs to be a reduction in turnover. Do you have to be in Sydney and directly impacted to receive the JobSaver? No, you don't. It applies to all of New South Wales. The only application of the specific area is the disaster payment for the individuals. And that's where in week 2 and week 3, there were certain local government areas that were eligible, but from the 18th of July, everyone is eligible. So Sue, that's good answers for both of your questions there. Anywhere in New South Wales, and you just need the reduction in turnover. Okay, question from Rebecca. Can your bookkeeper give you the letter, or does it have to be your accountant? We haven't got the details on that yet, Rebecca. So what we found in the past with the New South Wales grants, that New South Wales, Service New South Wales puts a template on their website for the letter that they want to use. Way back when the grants first started happening, we had to create the letter ourselves, but of latter times, they've provided a template letter on their website. So I'm not 100% sure yet whether a bookkeeper can sign off on that, or whether it does have to be an accountant. That's going to be one of the stay tuned answers. Okay, question from Fee. If you're registered for GST, but your turnover was slightly less than 75,000, will you still be eligible? So Fee, what they discuss when they talk about the $75,000 turnover, they don't talk about a GST registration at all. So it's going to come down to the turnover. So if your turnover is $73,000, that's going to put you in the micro business category, and you will need to apply for the grants under the micro business area, not the JobSaver area. Question from Bobby, and thank you guys for posting all these questions. There's a lot of them. I understand it's we're at a time of great uncertainty, and we really want to make sure that we can access these grants, for our businesses to keep us going as much as we possibly can. Okay, question from Bobby. Let me just grab a sip of water, guys, sorry. Okay, the disaster payment when you lodge allows you to claim if you are self-employed. I am self-employed and have received the first 2 payments. My turnover is below $30,000. Wow, isn't that interesting? Well, that completely contradicts everything that the New South Wales government has published. Okay, so Bobby is saying she's a sole trader. and she's already received the first 2 payments and her turnover is below $30,000. Okay, well, again, as I say, Bobby, that completely contradicts everything that the New South Wales government has published on these grants. So what else can we say? But if you believe that you're eligible, then you might as well go on and apply. Question from Belinda. Can you stand down staff and still get JobSaver? Yes, you can. But as I mentioned, the JobSaver is a percentage of the wages that you pay. So if your staff are stood down, then the amount you receive will be less. Question from Naomi. Regarding JobSaver and maintaining staff levels, is it a headcount of active employees or employees being lodged through STP? i.e. can casuals be stood down but maintained in the headcount as they are not terminated? Do you know what the crazy thing is, we've got our federal government that's gone and put in place this very complicated system of STP, forcing employers to lodge our information as each payroll is paid. But that STP is a federally based system, not a state-based system, and the administration of these grants is through Services New South Wales state-based system. So there is actually no reconciliation between, would you believe, what you lodge through STP and how we're going to make these claims. Now, it may be that some of the reporting does, it may be that there are some reports that we have to provide to Revenue New South Wales, to Service New South Wales to support it. But at the minute, the data is not being pulled from the lodgements that go to the ATO that are all federally governed. Crazy, right? Just crazy. So what I would suggest is, as I mentioned through the presentation, they are looking at headcount, not at wages paid to people. So if you've got people that are stood down, that are not receiving wages, they are still included in your headcount. Hopefully that answers your question, Naomi. Okay, question from Joanne. Do we have any idea when the full criteria will be published? Joanne, your guess is as good as mine. Now, what they do tend to do is publish at the least convenient times. So I would suggest it will come out this weekend because we are due to start applying from Monday. So quite interesting. Now, often, you guys will be aware of this. The experience that we had in the last round of the JobKeeper and the Cash Boost were that initially they put very tight application times on these grants, but as they realised that people and businesses needed time to process their information and make their applications, they tended to lengthen or extend the deadlines for the applications. So I know we're all super keen to get this, but what I would be suggesting to everybody, one of the key things to be doing right now is actually making sure your business files are up to date, making sure your Xero file's up to date, making sure your MyOb file, your QuickBooks file, whichever system you use to account for your business, work with your bookkeepers, work with your employees and get all that data completely up to date, because we're not yet 100% sure which period we're going to test on. And I think if you want these grants sooner, then have all your information up to date so the testing can be done. Okay, another question from Bobby. My income for last financial year was over $30,000 under 75. Only over the 30 as I received JobKeeper last year. I would suggest, Bobby, that JobKeeper will be excluded from these turnover tests for businesses. That is not usual business income, and I would suggest it's going to be usual business income. So we might have to look at that a little bit more closely for you, Bobby. And I know that you work very closely with Dana on your accounts, so we will be speaking to you 100% as the detail of these testing becomes available for us. Question from Marty. Hi Marty, how are you going? I need to come and see you and get my hair done. Does this mean that employees don't need to apply for the individual disaster payment if the employer are applying for the JobSaver package? No, 100% no. The employees themselves have to apply for that disaster payment, and they apply through Services Australia, and the employer applies for the JobSaver package. Now, the employee may not be eligible for the disaster payment if they haven't lost the hours of work. But in your case, Marty, so Marty runs a hairdressing salon in downtown Caringbah here, beautiful business. So Marty, if you have stood down your employees, which you've had to because your business has been closed, every one of those employees, and that includes you too, Marty, is eligible to jump onto Services Australia and apply for your disaster payment of your $500 to $600 a week. Now, when we are eligible for your business, we will have a look at claiming on certainly the grant as well, up to the $15,000, as well as the JobSaver payments. So remember, the JobSaver payments are weekly payments, minimum of $1,500 for a business over 75 grand, and capped at $10,000. So hopefully that's clear. So employees have to go and apply themselves through Services Australia. Businesses apply through Services New South Wales. Okay, question from Julie. Okay, JobSaver. Maintaining employee levels. What happens if an employee resigns? I've already covered that because it's not based on maintaining employee levels. I understand what you're saying. If an employee resigns genuinely, I would suggest that would be okay in terms of maintaining employee levels. What they're looking for is they're looking for businesses not to sack bunches of people. And if you haven't sacked the person, if they've resigned voluntarily, then I believe that would satisfy the headcount rules, Julie. Good question. Okay, question from Belinda. Excuse me again. Okay, so Belinda's question is along a similar line. Is the maintenance of the headcount based on the employer not terminating, or does an employee resignation count? So if 2 employees resign suddenly, are you ineligible? I would suggest not again, because that's the employee resigning rather the employer sacking. So Jenny has asked, what is the turnover of 75,000 period 12 months or to last financial year? So the turnover, basically, let me just flip back to our screens. The turnover test is as at 1 July 2020, I would suggest. So again, we don't have complete clear detail on these tests, but the wages test is as at 1 July 2020. I would suggest the turnover test would be 1 July 2020 as well. I'll come back to you more on that, Jenny, once I get some clarity from the government departments. Okay, question from Di. Hi Di, how are you going? We haven't been paying ourselves a wage for the last 3 months. Should we go back and process wages to ensure eligibility? You don't need to do that, Di. I would suggest that you can apply for the disaster payment through Services Australia, and that you would be eligible for at least the minimum $1,500 per week from the JobSaver program. So I don't believe that you would necessarily have to go back and process those wages. Okay, good. Thank you for the kind words coming through on the chat, guys. I certainly appreciate that. We work really, really hard here. We spend a lot of time getting across these grants very quickly so that we can get information out to you. There's some long hours that are put in behind the scenes to get us to the point that we're able to understand, interpret, and communicate to you guys the detail in these packages. All right, let me, okay, if there's any last questions from you guys, please post them quickly, because we will be finishing up in about 5 minutes. Okay, so a couple of other questions that I've been asked by clients in the last couple of days. Let me share these with you and the answers that we've given. Okay, just bear with me for a minute, because there's a heap more questions just been posted. Okay, question from Monique. Just reading the New South Wales Government slide on page 7, JobSaver says that the tax-free payment of 40% of pre-COVID weekly payroll, does that mean the 40% will be calculated on the gross wages before COVID? Do you know, Monique, there's so much conflicting information out there. Let's, again, we're just going to have to wait and see till they bring the exact detail out. Okay, let me just skim through these and make sure there's any that we haven't covered yet. Okay, question from a landlord, from John. Hi John, how are you going? I'm a landlord and the rent is my only income. I don't have a payroll as such. Can I claim job seeker? So as a landlord, John, you're not in business unless you have a multitude of properties, and that would be very difficult to support that you were in business. So you would not be eligible for the job saver, and you would also not be eligible for the disaster payment. The only thing that you would be eligible for, John, is the land tax relief. So a little bit tough for the landlords that are not in business, but that's the case, unfortunately. Thank you again for the lovely comments, guys. That's very kind of you. Okay. Sorry, just let me get across this one and I'll share it with you. Okay. Question from Kim. How are you going, Kim? On the disaster payment, when you apply, it states you cannot receive this if you are also getting a state small business payment. So the state payment for the business okay, I go back to my earlier comments. If you are a business and it's the business that is receiving the state-based payment, the $1,500 minimum per week. The disaster payment is as an individual, as an employee. So they are two different payments. So I would suggest that you can get both of those payments. Okay, Naomi said, you mentioned a business has to be trading for more than 12 months to be eligible for the business support grant, which is called the Job Saver. Oh, no, sorry, the grant, I beg your pardon. What date do they need to be trading from? Again, these are the finite details that we don't yet have. So the government's awesome at putting this broad brush information out, but the devil is always in the details. So Naomi, we will get across that and we will shoot that out to you as soon as we possibly can. Okay. If I have so a question from through the week. If I have a business with no employees, can I claim Job Saver? You can. So a business with no employees can claim at $1,000 a week for the Job Saver. So if you're a sole trader or if you're a business with no employees, so that is a business. Go back to the landlord question again. This is not a landlord. This is a business with no employees. This could be a sole trader, a partnership, a trust, or even a company that actually doesn't have any employees. So long as you meet that greater than 30% decline test, you can claim that $1,000 per week. Okay, let me just share some of these others. There was lots of questions around the alternate tests. Will there be alternate tests as there were under JobKeeper? And I am imagining that we will have alternate tests. I had a question about gross wages. Would this include allowances? I would suggest yes, and I would suggest it excludes super. This is a good question as well. Our business invoices monthly. How do we measure against fortnightly? So again, for the minute, I'm only speculating, but I would suggest that it may be that you have to compare month to month. But again, let's wait for the finite details on that to come out. Okay, last couple of questions. After confirmation that an employee is not required to use their annual leave payment before applying for the individual support payment. So again, this is not 100% clear. So I was working with Services Australia last night, and they seemed to indicate that you could claim that payment without using your annual leave, so long as you had used your sick leave or your carer's leave. So it's, yeah, I would suggest that you have a go when you apply and you see what they let you claim. My wife and I don't draw wages from our partnership. Does that mean that we're only eligible to one sole trader payment of $1,000 a week? Now that's going to be correct. So if you have a partnership or if you run a business through a trust that you don't take wages from, and there's the husband and wife, let's say that that both work in the business, you're only going to be able to get one lot of $1,000 a week, not multiple. Okay, covered employees standing down. I've changed my business structure from a sole trader to a company or to a trust. How do I compare my income? That I would imagine will be under the alternate tests when they are released. I just started my business 6 months ago. How do I compare the income? So we know that there is a 12-month trading test for the grant, but for the JobSaver, there is currently no 12-month trading test. So we will have to look to those alternate tests again for that period. I run an Airbnb and I've had cancellations. What am I eligible for? So for anybody that's running Airbnbs to generate their income, I would refer you back to the first few pages of our presentation and have a look at what the government has listed out on their infograph that I have shared with you. Okay, now I'll just share this last one question. Sorry, let me make sure we are, okay, we're nearly done. Okay, last question. So if I am a sole trader that is turning over more than $75,000, what am I eligible for? So the sole trader, let's presume that they have satisfied the greater than 30% income drop, then they are not eligible for the disaster payment, I would think, subject to Bobby's comments earlier. What they are actually eligible for is the COVID business grant, which covers the first 3 weeks of the lockdown, and then the JobSaver, which is $1,000 a week from the 19th of July. So that is consistent with the information that New South Wales Services and our Treasurer is publishing, albeit Bobby mentioned that she has been able to get through the disaster payment despite being a sole trader and less than $30,000. So interesting times while we all apply for these for sure, guys. So I'll end up today by saying we 100% have our full team here, educated, ready to go, ready to help you, ready to answer your questions. And certainly as those details come through, probably over the weekend, we will be testing and we will be in touch with you as soon as we can. Please come to us if you want things fast-tracked for your business because you are in a particularly bad position. Please come to us and we will fast-track you. But there's a lot of information that I've covered today. I'm sure there are more questions. Please feel free to contact any of the team at Sullivan Dewing, myself included, with any of those questions, and we will help you as much as we can. All right, thank you guys for attending this morning. Stay safe, stay well, and I will host another webinar next week with any developments and look forward to seeing you then. Thank you. Bye now.